Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Raven. Our guest today is Ivan Bodley, aka Funkboy. He is a bass player. He describes himself as music director for the stars because he has performed with, at this point, the number might be higher, but at least 52 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees and counting. This has ranged from performers like Elvis Costello, The Temptations, Bo Diddley, and Wynonna Judd. So there's quite a range there. He's played in 13 Broadway shows. He played a President Obama Inaugural Ball. He's been on many late shows, including Late Night with Conan O'Brien, and morning shows, including Today and Live with Regis and Kelly. So before I tell you more, Ivan, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to hear your story, and there's a lot of fun things to talk about. People might look at you and say, "Hey, rock and roll," but you've got range. You play jazz. You do it all, right?
Yeah, my sort of standard joke is I'll work for whoever will hire me. I'm a musical prostitute. I'll do anything for money. Um, that said, I do have a very large range of stuff that I like genre-wise, that I actually actively engage with.
Yep.
So, and also in keeping a diverse portfolio as a professional freelancer, yeah, you got to be able to jump any direction at any time. So yeah, it's ranged from country to rock to R&B to soul to bluegrass, whatever, classical,
Yeah.
whatever they'll pay me for, I'll do it.
It sounds like you can and that you do it well. So Ivan is a magna cum laude graduate of the acclaimed Berklee College of Music in Boston. He's an inductee into the New York Blues Hall of Fame, another genre, if you hadn't mentioned that one. And he's author of the book, Am I Famous Yet? Memoir of a Working Class Rock Star. He also has a podcast. Ivan has traveled to 31 countries and he's played the audiences as large as 82,000 people. What was that audience? That sounds like a Super Bowl halftime or something.
It was a football game halftime. It was the Jets Bengals game at Thanksgiving Day,
Mm.
and sold out Jet Stadium. When I looked up the capacity online, it's like 82,566. I'm like, yep, we were there, and the place was full of people. I was performing with the cast of the Broadway show Rock of Ages.
Mm.
So we did the halftime show, and yeah, I was seen by everybody who was in the room and nobody on television, and it was great fun.
No, I bet that was a large television audience there. And this is maybe putting you on the spot before we get to the favorite mistake question. Do you have a favorite Broadway show of the ones that you've played in?
It probably Rock of Ages, not only because of what the nature of the show was, but because I did it so long. I subbed on that show. I was never the principal basis on it, but I subbed on it for probably 300 performances over the course of 5.5 years. So it got to be, a group of old friends. It became a really familiar sort of thing, and it was like giving a rock concert for 1,000 people every night. You went on stage. It was a lot of fun. It was a
Yeah,
blast to play.
yeah, that's great. That's great. So, gosh, I'm sure there's going to be a good story here, or there are stories of all the different things that you've done
Yeah.
musically and professionally. Might not be easy. It's not, guests always say it's not easy to decide, but I'm going to ask you what is a favorite mistake, or what is your favorite mistake?
Well, there's so many. I've made so many mistakes. For me, it kind of comes down to, and I talk about this in the book a little bit. Like, there's been a number of sort of like epic firings. It's like gigs that or really big gigs that I was really into, really wanted to keep, and then you are relieved of your employment for reasons that may or may not be apparent, reasons that may or may not have anything to do with you.
Mhm.
And then you go back and you try to second guess, well, if I'd done this X, Y, or Z, would it have avoided this, career altering firing? And it's impossible to really say sometimes, like there's only one of them I can kind of say for sure that I probably should have done something a little different. But it's, again, it's really hard to second guess because very often you don't have all of the information, and the decisions kind of get made arbitrarily because the budget changed or the style of music changed, or in this one case that I'm thinking about that I'll tell you about more, it could be the singer's shoes didn't fit right, so the one I'm sort of thinking of, I was I was touring with a certain disco diva who shall remain nameless, just because I do love her as a human being and as an artist. But the incident was, I was her music director, conductor, bassist, put together a young new band for her, and this is back in the '90s.
Mhm.
And they were getting, because we were young and hungry, they were getting us pretty cheap, and we were flying literally halfway around the world. Like we went to Singapore and that kind of stuff, for nowhere near enough money for what it took, because you go to Singapore, even if you're there for 24 hours, it's 4 days of your life traveling, and so they were getting us for cheap. But we were enjoying the experience. We were enjoying the adventure, the whole thing. It got to a point, however, we were set to travel to Europe for, again, way too low money, and the band was starting to grumble. All the people that I had hired were saying, "Listen, this is not enough money. It's too light. Like we need more money. We need more money." And I could sense like this mutiny sort of growing underneath me.
Mhm.
So I went to the manager, who at the time was also the spouse, which is a difficult sort of relationship that I've experienced in other situations, and it's something that can be, delicate to negotiate at best.
Mhm.
So I just told the spouse manager, I said, "Listen, we really need like a $50 person, sort of a very modest kind of increase to go to Europe for a weekend kind of thing."
Yeah.
It was just such a weird situation, like, because I was never in touch with the manager directly. I was in touch with the manager's nephew, who was the one answering the phone. So we never had a direct conversation. And there was also like I was going to have like a face-to-face meeting with him when we were literally in Singapore, and he had gotten intoxicated and fallen off the stage and broken his foot. So
Yeah.
he was like in the hospital when I was going to have this big, face-to-face, heart-to-heart about the money and thing. I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" So it was going badly. So I kind of said, "Listen, we need like a modest increase because the band's getting antsy. It's not too much to ask. It's a fair price." And he said, "Okay, I'll get back to you." We were to leave on a Friday, and this plane tickets are involved. Like we're traveling internationally. We're going, like, I think, to Germany on a Friday. I got a call on a Wednesday that said, "Okay, you're all fired, and we have a band in Europe that we're going to use, and thank you very much." Sort of unceremoniously fired.
Yeah.
I got a call from one of the horn players. He said, "Listen, the weekend's ruined. We're all fired." They called the horn players independently and said, "Would you guys mind going fill in?" Because they had like a rhythm section in Europe, but they wanted to take the American horns. And I said,
Yeah.
"You have my blessing. Go do it. Thank you for the call. I understand. Go make the money. I don't begrudge anyone." What happened the next gig after that was the entire band got hired out from under me at the same old money, and they all went. And I was like, "Okay, wait a minute." So my mistake there was sort of not gauging the situation, both in terms of, how severe the mutiny was, because they all took the same job for the same money, without me involved. And then also sort of not understanding the communication factors with the manager spouse and how I was going to be, rebuked so, so completely without warning, 2 days before we were to leave on an international trip. So there were some things I definitely could have done better. But then there were some other things that I know that were way out of my control because they had some very peculiar ways of doing business.
Yeah.
And I learned never to sort of like be ready to lay down and die on a gig, on behalf of a side person, if I didn't really sort of either share their complete, convictions about their issue, or just, be able to go back to them and say, "Listen, this gig pays what this gig pays. You don't have to take it. It's fine. I understand completely if you don't want to do, fly to Singapore for X amount of dollars. Say no. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'll find somebody to do it, and maybe they won't get the best band, whatever, but I'll find, somebody wants to work for that kind of money." So I didn't have that sort of negotiating skill. I just sort of felt like, oh, the whole band wants this, so therefore I need to step up and say something. And we all got fired. And then they all took the gig again without me.
Yeah, I mean,
immediately after.
I'm not surprised that they fired you or tried to replace the band and tried to replace the band. I am surprised that part of the story of like, well, everybody came back, and I mean, it's probably just sort of back to your point about you choose what you do. They wanted more money, they needed more money, but I guess there wasn't a better alternative at the time for them.
Well, also they didn't really need more money. They just wanted more money. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But again, when it came down to push comes to shove, they took the same money. I was like, okay. And then because I mentioned the one horn player who called me, that's the only person that I've remained friends with to this day. Everybody else, like, not that I'm holding a grudge for 30 years, but I'm kind of, it's like, like we shan't work together again if you're going to sort of pull that kind of stunt and then not have the courtesy to sort of say, listen, they've offered me this money. Do you mind? Which, and I don't mind.
Yeah. Or the courtesy of thank you for going to bat for us, even though it didn't work out.
And hiring them all in the first place. I hired all of them.
Right.
And I got one phone call and I was like, okay, I know who my friend is in that band. And all right. So interestingly enough, fast forward 15 years from that incident, I get a call from a buddy of mine that says, hey, I'm putting together a new band for this certain disco diva. And I was like, and do you want to play bass in it? And I was like, I said, is the husband still the manager? He said, nope. I said, I'm in.
Well, so you did.
So I took the job, and but I said, understand something. We're all going to be fired. I said this to the new band. I said, you have to understand, we're all going to be fired. And they all are like, no, we know we're very competent. We know what we're doing. We're going to be a great band we're not going to get fired. I said, mark my words. I know how this person operates. We're all going to be fired. And eventually they were all, I think all but one of them, they've all been fired. They've all been fired.
Yeah.
Just because that's the way, like I said, the shoes are too tight, fire the trumpet player. The catering's not right, fire the bass player. Like that's kind of the MO of that organization. And I recognize it from way back.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, going into the first gig, after this 15-year hiatus, I said to the band leader, I said, don't tell her it's me. Like, let's get, like, I don't want to have anything, any preconceived notions, any, we're doing a gig in, I think, Virginia Beach or something. So we hadn't met the star yet. The band was together. We had all the charts. We knew what we were doing. I said, don't tell her it's me. Like, let me get there and do the gig first before we sort of go into the ancient history of the thing. Because I estimated in my mind that one of four things could happen. Either she did remember me or she didn't remember me. And this was either a good thing or either a bad thing.
Sure.
And I thought, at least 50 to 75% of those scenarios would be fine. They'll work in my favor and I'll be fine. But there's a 25% chance she could just hit the roof and I'm out of my tail,
Yeah.
So when I got to the gig, I said, I re-met the person. I said, I used to play for you a long time ago. And she said, where are you from? I said, New York. She said, okay. I was like, nothing, no memory. I was like, great.
It could have been a mistake to bring that up, but it didn't. It clearly didn't jog.
I didn't want to pretend that we'd never met ever, but I never went into the old details about, what happened in ancient history time.
Well, I would imagine, a diva is probably focused mainly on the diva, on herself. I was going to ask a general question. When you are playing in the backing band for a huge named performer, you're not the band, but you're playing with them. How much to a fault do they view the backup band as like interchangeable cogs, almost to a point where like it might be disrespectful of like, oh, I can find another bass player, no problem.
Well, it varies wildly, person to person, and to some extent, that's accurate. That's true. You have to look at the way they sort of run a Broadway pit. If we have a 16-piece orchestra, We need somebody sitting in the bass chair who can read those notes and play those parts faithfully. It doesn't have to be the same person,
Mhm.
and it has to be the same music so that the people upstairs can act and sing and dance, and that's fine. They're that way they allow people to sub out, to have other lives and other careers along with their Broadway sort of thing. And I know people that run bands kind of the same way. Like, you're the first call. We'd prefer you to be there. But if you can't for any reason, as long as you send a competent sub who can read music and cut the gig and do everything we need to do, it's fine. Um, it, but there are definitely people who are sort of like, and this aforementioned Diva was one of them, sort of like, everybody was expendable, everybody was interchangeable. And I think, honestly, the way that she got conditioned into doing that is because the former husband, former spouse, former manager, in an effort to sort of control access to her, like when anytime anybody would sort of, get close to her, they would get fired. Like he was trying to sort of maintain kind of control over the situation. So I think after 40 years of doing that, that just became her MO. It's like, oh yeah, you just, replace this person, replace that person, and became a manner of doing business kind of thing,
Yeah. So, I mean, I imagine there's a range of personalities and working relationships. If you're touring with someone, are they getting to know you? Are you becoming friends? Do they even, or do they even not really know your name and you're just like, hey, bass? Or like, I mean, do you get the whole range of that when in
I've
the
had
sort of
every range of that.
transactional, sorry?
I've had every range of that. Yeah, the full range of it. And you have to be a little cautious too, because you can't be overly familiar with somebody that you don't really know. I mean, if somebody happens to be famous, you feel like you know them better than you really do because you just haven't spent that much time in a room with them. And also, you have to sort of keep in mind this is true of any employment situation. Like you can't be overly familiar with the boss. Like you have to understand who's signing the paychecks and why, and then sort of not to sort of keep your place, but sort of maintain a perspective over what your actual relationship is. There is a certain transactional element to it. Famously, Duke Ellington was asked, how do you keep this large orchestra together over so many years? He said, I have a very secret plan. I pay them money.
Sure.
Like, yeah, okay, got it, But he also was loyal to people. Like he's famously a band leader who would keep band members for decades, And I know other people that work in bands that, have been in the same gig for 25, 30 years. That's a personality type of a certain artist type, not universal. I think Neil Diamond was kind of famously that way. He had the same people for 30 years. I think Jimmy Buffett's band is that way. I think, I don't know for a fact, but I think some of those people have been there for decades, So it depends. It depends on the employer. It depends on the situation. It also depends how much they work. Like a lot of acts go out and they'll do a month or two in the summer, and that's their year. That's what they do. So, so you don't have a 365-day exclusive contract with them. You can't, because they don't pay all of the mortgage or the rent or whatever you're doing,
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it depends.
And it probably depends on the performer. I mean, as a freelancer, you've had a lot of variety, and there's a question of, well, do you like the variety, or do you ever get bored playing the same music every night?
I don't. But part of the reason that I don't is because I do so many different types of gigs. Again, going back to the Broadway thing, what the Broadway people want, they want repetition. They want it to be pretty much almost exactly the same night after night after night. And that becomes a challenge to sort of stay focused, keep it fresh, keep it energetic. Especially if you're doing 8 shows a week, it's really hard to keep your focus, keep your head about you. We have this kind of a funny term that some of the Broadway people use. They call it going to the white room. in terms of like in the middle of the show, you just like suddenly you blank. You're like, I have no idea what the next note is.
Mhm.
I don't know what the next chord is. I don't know where I am. I don't know what day it is. You just kind of like your eyes cross. And I can't tell you how many times that's happened, especially on Rock of Ages. The whole band was on stage too.
Hmm.
My hand would just give me a gift. My hand for the muscle memory would just go like, it would just hit a G. I'm like, yes, that's
Yeah.
it. The hand saved me. I'm like, it's very funny, but it's a real challenge to sort of keep the focus. But it's not been a problem. I enjoyed it, even when you have these mini strokes on stage.
Or maybe it's just you're in the zone, and I mean, the only comparable thing I can think of, and I occasionally I get to wave a pair of drumsticks at a guest, like I'm doing
Nice.
here. I played pit orchestras in high school and a couple of times in college, just obviously very amateur, and like the run of a show would only be a long weekend.
Right.
And
Sure.
I always remember feeling like you kind of get to the point of like, all right, we're finally nailing
You
this.
got it, right? Now
then
you
boom,
got it.
and then it's over. Like, oh, if we could have done a second week of shows, like those would have been even better. But
I feel that way with most of the artists I work with. They're limited engagements. They're limited runs. Like we're going out, we're doing a long weekend. And you're right. By the third show, the band's blazing, and thank you, we're done. Great.
But you move on. And I was going to ask you, Ivan. You point out how you have a section on your website with not just your resume, but a list of gigs I didn't get and why. I mean, so it's interesting. Like people in tech industry and other settings have been posting their quote unquote failure resumes. That's almost become
Right.
kind of a trendy thing. But like,
Yeah.
tell us about why you've done that on your website.
Well, not to buck the trends, but I've had that up there for a long time.
Yeah.
That's been up there at least 20 years. I've had that on
Mm-hmm.
there. I just find it sort of interesting because I think that people tend to try to paint a picture like it's been all success all the time, and that you're supposed to write a resume or a curriculum vitae that just shows like you're just climbing, everything is up, 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 up. And in the performing arts, especially, it's just not so. That's just not the way it happens. Um, I also mentioned in the books, I came to realization at some point, I don't know how many years in, maybe a decade or two in, like I've been fired to almost as many times as I've been hired to replace the guy who's been fired.
Mm-hmm.
Like it kind of goes around in a circle so much. I got a phone call yesterday about a thing that was like, this isn't going to work out anymore. We're going to have to stop doing this. And I was like, okay, like it didn't even faze me. I'm like, it doesn't feel like some career-long rebuke, that they've made about your personal artistic integrity.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the nature of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the music field, which is kind of, quote unquote glamour profession. And there's all these people sort of waiting around out the door to take your job for less money. These are sort of highly coveted kind of positions, and employers know that. So they can get you sort of initially, at least for quite cheap. So, it's a long sort of process to kind of keep that perspective. And the gigs that I didn't get, and why, are just sort of like it becomes anecdotal at a certain point. Like there's a couple of auditions that I blew. There's a lot of situations where the scheduling just didn't work out. Like I've been called, hired to do something, and something else preempted it. A few things where like we had something scheduled. Be at the studio on Monday, you're going to record with Keith Richards as a matter of fact. It was a Hubert Sumlin record, like the bass track wasn't working and they wanted to replace it. And Keith's on the track and you're going to be playing with Keith and Hubert, at least on tape, if not in the room. I'm like, great, that's great. Let me do that. I don't care how much it pays. I'll do it for free just to have the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And, Sunday night they called back and said, yeah, we're just going to leave it the way it is. It seems like it's fine. I was like, okay.
Yeah. But
there's nothing that I did, it just the gig came and went without me doing anything. And that's happened a bunch of times,
Yeah. But I mean, if you're being brought in to replace somebody who was fired, did they ever tell you why that person was fired? Do you ever try to find out so that you can avoid being the next one fired? Or
I got hired in recent memory. And the basic reason that I got was the bass player before me had worn a pink shirt.
That was it.
That was the main. That was the main. I mean, there were other factors,
Yeah.
but the biggest infraction was he wore a pink shirt. I'm like, huh. All right. Note to self. Well, fortunately, I don't personally own any pink shirts. It wasn't a struggle for me.
Right.
You see me dressed in black because that's mostly what I have, all of what I have.
Yeah.
But it was like, all right, so I guess the wardrobe is a factor in this particular gig, and it turns out it wasn't nearly the biggest factor, but that was the reason they gave me. It's like, yeah, the pink shirt. And I was like, huh, okay, sure,
But,
no problem.
I mean, was that a question of like insubordination or something? I mean,
I think I don't know because I wasn't there. I don't know the person,
fair enough.
and I wasn't in the circus. But what I was able to glean from it, it was kind of a tone deafness to what the gig was and what the needs of it were. Like, I don't think that, I don't think I ever would have worn a pink shirt to that gig. It's like, it's just not, it wasn't one of those kinds of gigs, it was like a classic rock kind of thing. Like it needs to be old school sounding, looking, that whole kind of thing, and like even the equipment that I would bring to a gig like that, like I would sort of like, especially if a recording artist or something like that, I'll do a little research and I'll go back to the recordings and I'll say, okay, so what kind of equipment were they using for this kind of thing? So, when I was music director for Sam Moore from Sam and Dave, I was on the road with him for 13 years, Initially, when I started the gig, this was I met him in the 90s. In the 90s, we were kind of doing like, the bass guitar world was becoming very handcrafted, boutique-y looking things that looked like coffee tables. They're beautiful pieces of furniture, but they weren't necessarily meat and potatoes bass instruments, And when and I started Sam's gig, playing this 5-string with the fret dot lit up, had LEDs on it and stuff. It was a really jazzy looking, great looking bass. But as I got into the gig, I kind of realized, like, no, all the Stax Volt stuff was recorded by Duck Dunn on a Fender Precision bass, a 1962 Fender P bass. And if you want that sound, you kind of got to buy a Fender, And I already had one, so I was like, all right, like I've kind of put down all the boutique 5 strings, and I went back to my old 4-string Fender, which I'd had for years and years and years. And same thing with all the Motown stuff, all the James Chambers and stuff. That's all Fender P bass, all that stuff. So if you're doing Stax and Motown gigs and you bring one of these, BC Rich, pointy, guitars like that, people are going to look at you funny, and they should. You're kind of like, maybe you didn't do the research enough to know what instrument you should bring to the job,
Yeah, well, that's interesting of mistakes you could make around what you wear, what your instrument is. And by the way, Sam Moore, there is an amazing there's video of you playing with Sam Moore on Conan O'Brien.
Right, that's right.
On YouTube. That I enjoyed that a lot. But boy, there's I mean, I'm sure so I think it's interesting. It seems like there's types of gigs where it's just all about the performance. You're in a pit, or you're recording and nobody sees you. But then you think of like a live performance is visual as much as anything. Like, I mean, getting your haircut could be a mistake that maybe gets you fired if it wasn't 100%. In line with the look of the band, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, I've heard of people being fired because of a hairline or something. Like, that's genetic. I have no control over that. But it's like it's not the right person for the gig. And again, I mean, I keep harping on the Broadway thing, but the Broadway shows I've done, 4 of them, the musicians were on stage. So when you're on stage, there's costume, there might be makeup, there's choreography, probably there's stage business you have to do. There are things that it's not just play the parts and play them. You got to do that on any show. Sometimes there's extensive choreography, like Ain't Too Proud, the Life and Times of the Temptations, the musical on Broadway. There was a big the finale. This video wall went up, and behind it there was a huge reveal of 16-piece orchestra, all wearing white suits, all playing white instruments, doing identical choreography that we had to learn. I had to go to band camp, choreo school to like learn this routine
Yeah.
to be able to do it. And it was like this shocking moment. The whole audience was like, there was the biggest reaction of the night was when the orchestra got revealed and they realized, oh, we've been playing this stuff live all night. We just thought that maybe it was pre-recorded. You can't tell, kind of thing. But very much so, yeah. The look and the choreography, like it was as much a part of the visual presentation as it was just the audio. And show business, it kind of always been that way, but it's especially been that way since the MTV era, since things got so visual. I mean, it was arguably before that, when you think about, ELO or KISS in the 70s with all their theatrics live,
Sure.
the pyro and the things blowing up and the costumes, but that really went into hyperdrive for everybody starting in 1981 when suddenly video killed the radio star.
Right.
And, it's been that way ever since. So you have to sort of be aware of the visual element of what you're doing.
Yeah. So so again, our guest is Funkboy Ivan Bodley. His book is Am I Famous Yet? Memoir of a Working Class Rock Star. And you say in the notes there about the book something about being a rock star without the annoying fame. So I wanted to ask you, I mean, like, how important was that to you? Did you want to be famous or did you just want to play music?
Right, exactly. That's the question. That's the question I spent the entire book sort of exploring. It starts out, a lot of us got into this because we were sort of like awkward kids in high school and wanted to be with the cool kids, and sort of playing music sort of felt like you were with the cool kids, and it got you recognition and adoration from people who wouldn't ordinarily speak to you in the hallway of the school. So when I first experienced that, I was like, oh, wait a minute, that's something I can do. Like get a gymnasium full of 600 people applauding wildly for what I'm doing. Like that never happened to me before. So that level of attention or notoriety feels like that's something you need to chase after some way, in the performing arts or whatever it is, and then as you go through it, again, with Rock of Ages, the band was on stage for the full 2.5-hour performance. So when you came out the stage door of Rock of Ages, there would be people there behind a barricade, and they were waiting to get autographs from like whoever the star was, Konstantin Maroulis or Dee Snider did the show for 3 months, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But as the bass player, you get a little collateral damage. You get like a couple of autographs, maybe a selfie with some people in line. And so when you came out the stage door, there'd be like people would go like, "Yay!" So you were famous until you turned the corner on 7th Avenue. Like you were famous for half a block. And then as soon as you got past the corner, you were right back into obscurity, immediately. So it's become a lifelong sort of point of interest to me to sort of see fame is a tenuous thing, and it affects people in different ways, but also there are just wildly divergent levels of fame. There's only a few Michael Jacksons in the world, people who are just uber famous, just can't go out in public ever. Most people are kind of like famous with a certain subset of people. And this is kind of an antiquated reference, but I keep using like, I usually say Janet Jackson, but maybe I could say like Rihanna now. Like, she sold 10 million records or something like that. That means in this country alone, there are like 310 million people who don't know who she is and doesn't care. Like my parents wouldn't have known, that kind of thing. So wildly famous, and yet there are still people who don't know you, kind of thing. So it's a tenuous thing. It's related to a period in time too. Like you can be wildly famous in the 80s and be in obscurity by the next decade, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I had to sort of temper my own quest for fame and figure out what part of it was something that I enjoyed and what part of it really had no meaning on my life, or just me trying to patch an emotional hole that was still there from something else. And it's an ongoing process. When I get the full answer, I'll write that book and let you know.
Yeah. I hope people will check out the book. And okay, you've brought up a couple of things. You knew I was going to bring up a movie that's certainly my favorite, and it's if it's not your absolute favorite, I know it's one of your favorites. This is Spinal Tap.
I have the set of 3 collectible action figures in the box on top of my dresser. I see them every morning when I wake up. I quote that movie probably every day of my life, and every time I go on the road with a band, I feel like we constantly sang "Hello, Cleveland."
Right.
Like it's so true to life. It's really hard to not reference it constantly.
I mean, even thinking of the action figures, I can imagine. I'm thinking of the scene. Nigel Tufnell, you'd be bringing me through. Like, look, still got the old tagger on it on the action, and then I'd start to point at it. You would tell no, don't point.
Don't even point at it. That's right.
Point.
Don't even look at it.
But you talk about the fleeting fame. I've been rewatching the movie. I've seen it more 100 times. I don't know, but there were so many mistakes made by the band, the manager, the record label throughout the course of it. You can kind of log them. But I was rewatching last night, and there's a scene where they get called in, like, look, one of our old songs from the 60s is on the radio, and they're enjoying the end. And then the DJ says, they later changed their name to Spinal Tap, currently residing in the Where Are They Now?
Where Are They Now? That's right.
Which looked soul crushing.
Here's what a crazy fan I am of that movie. There was a DVD package that I have, like the deluxe edition DVD, that has about 90 minutes of deleted scenes because they improvised the whole movie.
Yeah, right.
So I've watched that so many times. Like, I don't fully remember what was all in the original cut and what's like Bruno Kirby standing on the top of the coffee table singing Sinatra into a breadstick. I can't remember how much of it is from deleted scenes.
That was a deleted scene.
Right, exactly. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah.
And then also it had, like, the DVD used to have like a commentary track.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So they did the entire commentary track in character.
Right.
It's the three of them in character commenting on the whole movie. So it's almost like three full different movies on that DVD package, and I've enjoyed them all immensely. It's a great piece of art, very indicative of our weird music business.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen the band in concert twice. One was in
fabulous.
The 90s when they put out a new album, Break Like the Wind.
Break Like the Wind, yes.
And I saw them in an indoor theater in Chicago and then a big outdoor amphitheater in Detroit over the summer.
Did the Folksmen open for them?
Yes. So the same actors, different musician.
Because they would, in early tours, they got booed off stage several times as the Folksmen. People not realizing it was the same three guys.
But there's different things you've mentioned. Having a spouse come in as manager, that happens during the movie.
That's right.
Ian quits Janine, David St. Hubbins' wife, girlfriend, whatever the bleep she is. I think somebody becomes manager, and she tries putting him in.
Yeah, the new concept. She wants to show the band the costumes.
Wants to put them in costumes. But do you have? I was going to ask you two questions. Here about the movie. Is there a particular favorite scene or favorite mistake that you just enjoyed the most from the film?
There's so many.
Hard to choose.
I think my favorite thing, and again, this has happened to me. Some version of this on stage is when they come out and they're all in the pods on stage, and the pods all open except for
the bass player.
Yeah, his pod is stuck closed, and they do spend the entire number. He's in the pod playing, and he's trying to get the roadies' attention, and they're using hammers and saws and blowtorches trying to get the thing open. And they finally get it open right as the song is ending. And he comes out at the wrong time, and has to go back in, and gets one arm caught in the thing. And he's like, "Oh yeah, unbelievable." And I've had.
So you've had prop mishaps?
Oh yeah, big ones on stage in front of 1,000 people going, "Oh, sorry, well, what are you going to do?"
Go back and try again the next show, I guess.
Try again. Right?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Funkboy, for being here today. His book, again, is Am I Famous Yet? Memoir of a Working Class Rock Star. You can find his website at funkboy.net. I'll put links in the show notes. And really, boy, thank you for sharing your stories and for being a guest. And maybe we can do. I don't know. Maybe this is a mistake to ask you publicly. Maybe we can do another episode just geeking out on Spinal Tap and the mistakes.
Oh, anytime. I could talk for hours about that band. No worries. That's a done deal right there.
Well, that would be great. So, thank you again for being a guest. Thanks for telling great stories and lessons learned. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate you connecting me with your audience. I look forward to hearing from everybody.
Yeah.